a kingdom's coffers flung open and gold poured into a single wish, reimagining Snow White for a new century. By the time cameras stopped rolling, the tale had devoured nearly $300 million, reshoots and marketing included, making it Disney's priciest gamble since John Carter. Opening weekend should have been a coronation, yet the box office greeted the princess with just $42 million domestic, a number so small against the spend that insiders whispered negative ROI before the credits even faded. So how did the fairest fairy tale in the vault become the studio's darkest financial spell? Was it the bold script rewrites, the casting firestorm, or a political whirlwind that poisoned the apple before audiences took a bite? Keep watching, because the autopsy of this wish gone wrong reveals fractures running far deeper than a single flop. And the next twist might shock you more than any magic mirror ever could. The royal coffers didn't just empty for Snow White, they hemorrhaged. Disney's own filings pegged the production cost at $270 million before a single ticket was sold, while industry trackers add that once marketing, merchandising tie-ins, and global rollouts were folded in the tab, swelled past $370 million. Business Insider cut to the chase. The remake's price tag surpassed $270 million, a figure insiders now cite as the tipping point where a Disney tentpole moves from expensive to existential risk. So where did the extra gold go? A full year after principal photography wrapped, studio executives screened the first rough cut and panicked. Test audiences called the third act confusing and complained that the CGI forest folk replacing the dwarves looked unfinished. Within weeks, Disney greenlit emergency June 2024 reshoots in the UK, rewriting the finale, adding a brand new magic mirror set piece, and junking an entire song, Hidden in My Heart. Crew members who thought they were off payroll were rehired at peak rate overtime. VFX vendors were told to triple shift through the holidays. One lighting tech quipped on X that the film went from fairy tale to money pit in a single producer's note. All that frantic spending never translated to demand. Opening weekend stalled at $43 million domestic, and analysts now forecast a $115 million write-down once the streaming bump is baked in. Even bullish Disney shareholders concede the studio will be forced to list an impairment charge for the title on its next earnings call, not because the streaming window won't help, but because the hole is simply too deep to fill with Disney Plus clicks and Blu-ray sales. But swollen budgets are only half the story. The real shock came when audiences discovered why the reshoots were needed, because the film they'd been promised looked almost nothing like the one Disney finally unveiled. And that narrative U-turn is where our tale really starts to twist. Disney insisted its new princess would be timeless, yet the first shock came before a single frame hit theaters. Casting Colombian-Polish star Rachel ZEGLER forced the studio to rewrite the famous skin as white as snow description. Snow now earns her name after surviving a blizzard as a baby. Traditionalists cried foul, while ZEGLER dismissed the original as extremely dated, fueling critics who already saw the remake as a lecture rather than a fairy tale. The storm only intensified when Disney quietly replaced the seven dwarfs with motion capture forest folk, a decision sparked by actor Peter Dinklage's warning that the classic roles were a step backward. The studio touted the swap as progressive. Audiences called the CGI stand-ins uncanny, and advocacy groups for little-person performers said their livelihoods had been digitally erased. Memes comparing the characters to early 2000s video game sprites trended for weeks. Meanwhile, headlines multiplied over an alleged rift between ZEGLER and co-star Gal Gadot. Gadot's past IDF service drew pro-Palestinian protests, and insiders claim the pair's press tour chemistry froze faster than the Queen's mirror. Teen Vogue tracked every eyebrow raise and curt reply, turning a routine junket into a serialized feud watched by millions. By the time trailers dropped, Snow White and Snow Woke hashtags had attached a political brand to the film that even Disney's billion-dollar marketing machine couldn't scrub away. And when opening weekend finally arrived, those online tempests would erupt into a box office lightning strike. The moment Disney dropped its first teaser, the conversation swerved from fairy tale, sparkle to culture war crossfire. Lead actress Rachel ZEGLER dismissed the 1937 classic as outdated and sexist, promising her Snow would steer her own destiny. In follow-up profiles, she doubled down, calling diversity the backbone of cinema, and urging studios to nurture talent no matter what they look like. Conservative pundits pounced. Hashtags Snow Woke and No White rocketed through X alongside the perennial Go Woke Go Broke, amassing more than 120 million impressions in March alone. Viral clips of ZEGLER shrugging off Prince Charming fanned calls for a family boycott, with outlets like the New York Post branding her unhinged and a liability. From the opposite flank came a second boycott, this time over Gal Gadot's pro-Israel stance. BDS organizers urged viewers to skip the film outright. Student groups picketed campus multiplexes, turning Snow White into an unlikely proxy battle for Gaza. Amid the noise, tabloids seized on rumors that ZEGLER and Gadot could barely share a red carpet. A heartfelt Instagram post that thanked every soul on set conspicuously left Gadot unnamed. Page 6 tracked split junket schedules, while Teen Vogue charted the duo's icy body language like a live soap opera. Disney's handlers quietly booked the actresses on separate late-night shows to keep sparks off camera. By premiere week, buying a ticket felt less like choosing a movie than taking a side. 2 boycotts, dueling op-eds, and a meme tsunami had already poisoned the apple. And when opening weekend receipts finally dropped, the numbers proved just how lethal that bite could be. The trouble showed up on the very first receipt. Friday previews trickled in at just $16 million, and by Sunday night, Disney's $300 million gamble had scraped together $42.2 million domestic, barely enough to top the weekend, but nowhere near the studio's own low-end projection of $55 million. Worldwide, a modest $87 million haul rang alarm bells in Burbank. The princess would have to conjure $500 million just to break even. Then came the humiliation of week 2. Audiences evaporated, slashing ticket sales by 66% and knocking Snow White to second place behind Jason Statham's mid-budget thriller, A Working Man. Analysts called the plunge Marvel's-level catastrophic because a steep drop after a soft launch leaves no runway to recover. Legs never grew. Domestic grosses crawled toward $100 million and stalled. Global totals limped past $185 million after 6 weekends, well under the break-even line. By early May, trade papers were already penciling in an impairment charge north of $250 million on Disney's next earnings call, matching the write-downs. Once reserved for notorious flops like John Carter, even the film's encouraging B-plus cinema score couldn't save it. Good word of mouth means little when viewers simply don't show up, and studio polling found that families, the remake's target core, over-indexed on the decision to wait for Disney+. For exhibitors already nursing thin profit margins, Snow White became a cautionary tale. Marketing hype can't outshout controversy, and nostalgia isn't a free pass when the magic feels secondhand. The fallout reached corporate headquarters. Within days, budgets were frozen, remakes in development were shoved into strategic review, and one internal memo warned of franchise fatigue accelerated by political crossfire. What happened next inside Disney's glass towers, and which projects were quietly put on ice, would prove that a single poisoned apple can shake a kingdom's throne. The Monday after Snow White's dismal second weekend drop, Disney's Burbank war room felt more like triage than strategy. Finance chief Hugh Johnston warned the board that a title with no realistic path to profit would force a content impairment hit, later disclosed as $109 million in the company's May earnings filing. Bob Iger's response was blunt: freeze every remake in the pipeline until we know where the bleeding stops. The first casualty was the live-action Tangled. Pre-production in London halted overnight. Casting calls were yanked, and director Michael Gracey's deal went into turnaround. Multiple outlets, from Kotaku to Page 6, confirmed the pause, each citing the Snow White flop as the trigger. Inside the studio, a cost-cutting edict followed. No new remake may cross $150 million, target 30% below legacy budgets. The proof appeared 8 weeks later when Lilo and Stitch, shot for $100 million, less than half of Snow White's $270 million price tag, stormed theaters to a $361 million global debut run. Analysts instantly dubbed it the Stitch benchmark, a reminder that nostalgia can thrive on thrift. The upheaval didn't stop at spreadsheets. Longtime live-action chief Sean Bailey exited in February, replaced by Searchlight alum David Greenbaum, a promotion insiders read as Iger's vote for. Award-savvy storytelling over blank-check spectacle. One leaked town hall recap quoted Greenbaum telling staff, "Bigger isn't better. Better is better." With budgets slashed, projects shelved, and leadership reshuffled, Disney hoped the kingdom had steadied. But outside the castle, Rachel, ZEGLER's public crusade, and her career freefall, was spiraling into its own headline-hungry saga, and that PR wildfire was about to scorch whatever goodwill the studio still had left. Rachel ZEGLER took the box office gut punch as a personal crusade. Within hours of the second weekend collapse, she fired off a string of Instagram stories railing against political bias and insisting a silent majority adored Snow White, adding that box office math is meaningless next to story. Talk radio shows replayed the clips, while Newsweek and other outlets splashed the quote across their sites, branding it the $300 million shrug. The backlash only widened when an earlier post resurfaced in which she wished that Trump voters, and Trump himself, never know peace, a line she later walked back but which the BBC noted had already cemented her as a lightning rod in the culture wars. Hollywood's answer was swift self-preservation. Major studios quietly cut ZEGLER from shortlists, and the only greenlit project on her slate is She Gets It From Me, a dramedy opposite Marisa Tomei budgeted in the low, single-digit millions and headed for a limited theatrical run. At the same time, her agent steered her back to live theater, landing her a West End debut as Eva Peron in Jamie Lloyd's summer revival of Evita at the London Palladium. High prestige, lower risk, and a continent away from Hollywood gossip, columns. Even so, the commentary machine won't let go. Business Insider write-ups of Disney's Lilo and Stitch success still name-check ZEGLER as a cautionary tale. YouTube pundits track every flare-up, and petitions demanding her ouster from Evita ping-pong around fandom forums. For Disney, that means the Snow White narrative keeps mutating long after tickets stopped selling, and the studio's last hope of muting the noise rests on a streaming launch that could either redeem the film's reputation or pour accelerant on the fire. Which brings us to Disney's final Hail Mary, the Disney Plus debut that has executives holding their breath. With ticket sales frozen like the Queen's mirror, Disney pivoted to Phase 2, digital first, then Disney Plus salvation. On May 13th, Snow White hit premium VOD at $29.99. 2 weeks ahead of schedule, a move insiders called emergency monetization. Yet the early signal was chilly. By May 28th, the movie languished at number 17 on the US iTunes chart, behind a 25-year-old Mission Impossible re-release. Next up is physical media. Disney set a June 24th Blu-ray date packed with sing-along extras, hoping collectors will do what theatergoers didn't, open their wallets. But the real gamble is streaming. Decider and industry trackers slot the Disney Plus premiere for late June or the first Wednesday in July, lining up with the studio's new 100-day theatrical window. The same strategy floated for Pixar's Inside. Out 2. Why the feverish rush? Because analysts argue controversy converts to clicks. Business Insider notes that films dragged through the culture war mud often spike curiosity viewing once the price drops to free for subscribers, a potential lifeline that could soften Disney's looming $109 million write-down. Still, executives privately fret that families burned by theater reviews will stick to Lilo and Stitch reruns, leaving Snow White to stream in silence. In short, Disney has one last wish on the wishing well, that uproar equals eyeballs when the Y film lands in living rooms. Whether that wish comes true, or the apple stays poisoned, sets the stage for our final chapter. Disney's accountants have already stamped Snow White as a 9-figure fiasco, with analysts pegging the loss at roughly $115 million once all windows close. It's the largest red mark on a princess since John Carter, and the studio has moved. Fast to be sure it's the last. First course correction: spend less, risk less. In April, the live-action Tangled was yanked out of pre-production, and every remake still on the slate was ordered to shave budgets by 30%. The memo landed the same week the Snow White grosses hit their nadir. No coincidence. Second lesson: nostalgia sells, controversy doesn't. Just 2 months after Snow White fizzled, the leaner, chatter-free Lilo and Stitch roared to a $341 million global debut, proving families will still show up when the marketing is about heart instead of hashtags. Third, and most urgent realization: streaming can't fix everything. Disney rushed Snow White to digital on May 13th and will drop it on Disney Plus in late June, hoping curiosity clicks soften the blow. Yet early VOD charts suggest even free may feel too steep for a film that became a culture war football long before it was a movie. So has the kingdom finally learned its lesson? Smaller bets, lighter politics, and stories that invite rather than lecture worked for Stitch. But the next remake will test whether that shift is conviction or panic. Because in fairy tales and filmmaking alike, one truth always holds: wish wisely, or the apple bites back.